China EVs and more, where my co-host Lei and I will go over the week's most interesting and important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I read a free weekly newsletter that we pulled many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. I am your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. This is episode number 70. Before we get into NIO half day, we can call it a NIO half day, not a NIO full day. This is our primary topic today,
Yes.
But there's others. Let's quickly recap on the CAM May NEV sales, just very, very quickly when we got off last week. This was announced. Basically 2 million units, NEVs in the first 5 months. So I'm just going to say the first half is going to be 2.5 and second half is going to be more than 2.5 and we get to 5.5. That's the prospect. Simple number crunching.
Reminder for everyone, 2021 number came in at around 3.4 million units.
Yeah, so let's say, 2 million more. That's basically what we're looking at.
During a supply chain crunch and a COVID outbreak.
Yeah, so far it's looking good. June is progressing.
Things are looking up for sure.
Yeah, nicely. We don't seem to be having, at least I can't say we're going back to April, but we said it's going to take the entire Q2. And as we've seen some of the chatter, Tesla is doing its thing, right? It's toward the end of the queue. And that means...
So Tesla is back up to 100% production.
Pretty much.
Utilization. So
yeah. And going into that stretch, right? Today's the 16th, so 2 more weeks left in June.
And that took a public and private cooperation. Tesla did everything they could. The Shanghai local government did everything they could. And I think they need to work together very closely moving forward in order to keep that machine going.
Yeah, so the latest rumor, I think it's been denied, I think, that Tesla was going to reduce the rear-wheel drive version of the Model 3 from like 270 RMB to 220,000 RMB.
Those are just trial balloons, right? They're just seeing what the reaction is going to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly do it, but it will be interesting because everybody's raising prices, as is Tesla, right? They just raised prices of everything in the US today, all their models, by as much as, $6,000.
They're likely seeing what's out in the market here. They're likely seeing maybe some softness in their demand. And I think that they're playing defense a little bit here in China. They don't have to do that in Europe and the United States yet.
No. So that's a chatter. And that happened the night of the ES7 reveal. So
stealing thunder.
But anyways, back to our main topic today, NIO ES7, the updated 2022 866. Now we're all calling this they completed the 866 and the 757.
Yeah.
6 models now in place, pretty much 4 years after the ESA started deliveries. And that was June 28th, 2018. I remember very clearly. Yep. So kudos. Before we get into the comments, I wanted to ask you 2 questions.
Bring them on.
Number 1, if the world had only the 866 757, which would you choose?
I would say so. This is me still believing that I'm young and no family kind of thing, which I'm not. I'd love to have the ET5, right? Little sedan to throw around town, quick, good looking. I like the ES7, because it's the newest vehicle out there and it has the new design language on the front end with the shark nose and everything. But yeah, I think the ET7 is too big. And so I think I would go ET5. How about you?
Well, ET5 is their cheapest model of the six. Okay. So starting at 328,000 MMB. My answer would be the ES7, simply because it's the latest and the greatest. And I like it in terms of a size. ES8 would be the last on my list. And ET5 also would be my second.
Yeah. But you're much more mature than I am. I'm pretty immature.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of size, I think if I were to choose the sedans, I would choose the ET5, also because of the same reason.
I gotta say, Lei, the ET5 has to be eating into the MIC Model 3, right? It's got to be eaten into sales or orders at least, right?
Also, a big reason is if I was on the market, the ES7 would start deliveries, already end of August? Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
So from revealing to actually starting deliveries in only 2 months. So I'd be really happy.
Yep.
So that's number one. The second question, if the world had only the ES7, the Jidu Robo 1, and the Li Auto L9, which is revealing next week, we talk about it next week, which one would you choose?
So I'm leaning towards the ES7 or L9.
I think L9 would be perfect for your family.
Yeah, it seems big. It seems big. That's the only really apprehension I have. But hopefully my friends at Li Auto will allow me to have a look at it in July sometime. I'll go visit them in Justin Shunyi up in Beijing and hopefully get to touch and feel, maybe drive it around a little bit. I'm looking forward to that. But we had talked about this last week where now we're looking at actual design. We're looking at features. We're not even talking about range. We're not talking about anything else. So these guys have really matured over the last just 3 or 4 years, right? There was so much attention that the Jidu Robo 1 unveil got. Congratulations to that team for making it a global launch. The ES7, a ton of attention globally. These guys are people are waking up finally, right?
And we are also seeing that, remember, NIO is now pushing into those 4 additional European markets. And ES7 will really be a nice sized positioned vehicle for those markets.
So let me throw out some specifications here. So the ES7 lengthwise is 4,912 millimeters, and the ES6 is 4,850. They're both 5-seaters. So footprint-wise, they're virtually the same. And the ES7 slots in between the Model Y and the Model X. And so in the market, the ES7 fits perfectly. But in NIO's portfolio, they're really trying to thread a needle. And I really do see, although the ES7 is about 100,000 RMB pricier than the ES6, I do see a ton. I won't say a ton. That's probably an exaggeration. A decent amount of cannibalization going on. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I've seen some calling the ES7 the ES6 Pro.
Okay.
So basically, a much upgraded version of the ES6, but I'm not sure that I agree with that. But I think prior, when we talked about ES7 many times, I said it was a nose job of the ES8. And when this thing came out, I think I was wrong. It turned out really nice. I think it's now the flagship of NIO because it is the latest and the greatest, right? It's got this Banyan digital, the smart system. Whereas the other ones they talked about is the Alder, right? Alder, right? And all the perks, whatever is included. But when you talk about cannibalization, I think William Li and Qinli Hong, I think they've kind of responded to this. Maybe I know William did in the previous earnings call that he doesn't believe, or put it this way, that these 6 models are positioned differently, that they'll address different customers. But on the other hand, I think what you're saying, this cannibalization, is that we would expect the NT 2.0 models to take much more volumes going forward compared to the
Right.
A66. But my personal conclusion of this NIO half day yesterday was 2 things. One, and this might be overlooked a little bit because everybody was talking about ES7, is the upgraded A66 that they're upgraded to the Alder system. That you pay, I think, 9,600 renminbi. This is mostly for the cockpit, right? And plus 5G, you'll pay a little bit more. And this is something that I think is often overlooked, is because what do you do with existing customers, people who are owning older models, and how do they benefit? I think NIO has solved this dilemma by not only OTA on the software side, but right on some of the hardware.
And this is where they get you on the recurring revenue. Because if you have an older ES6, they're like, hey, upgrade, and you pay $100 a month. And guess what?
Yeah.
Now, physically, the car is a little bit older, but guess what? You have the latest software update.
And the other thing to me was this flagpole on the ground, that the ES7 would be the glass ceiling for models priced in the 400,000 to 500,000 RMB range, ICE or EV. This is what William said. So it's almost like poking at the L9, which is going to be right in that price range.
Oh, it is, for sure.
Yeah, when it reveals next week. So, right,
if you watch those breadcrumb videos between the ES7 and the L9, they're both targeting. It could be the exact same family that's in both cars in both videos, right? There's a little kid, there's a young couple going camping or whatever, right? It's like
yeah. Well, yeah, we speaking of camping, I think we're going to talk about that a little bit. But right, we're jumping ahead of ourselves. So let's compare. If we compare the L9 and the ES7, the way these models addressing consumer or customer need in terms of entertainment, infotainment, what's happening in the car, I think are a bit different, right? L9's got this, whole family. You can connect your Nintendo Switch.
Yep.
This type of thing. Whereas NIO is more tech focused. Let's say AR glasses, right, where you can watch movies.
Yeah, the panel cinema.
Yeah,
the panel cinema.
So it's slightly different, and also, it's a 5-seater. It's a mid to large size SUV, whereas L9 is almost like a full-size SUV. Yeah, so I thought that was putting that flagpole on the ground was kind of
well, and that wrinkle with the tow hitch, right?
Yeah, I tweeted that, and someone tweeted back saying, "I don't dismiss that." And I later realized that maybe it's not a pandemic play. I don't know. What's your take on this? Whether this will catch on? Maybe it already is.
Yeah, I think it's something that, first of all, it's not a huge thing, right? It's more the physical tow hitch is not a big deal, but how does it affect range? How does it affect everything else about the car, the power of the car? Because it didn't really get into that. And if we look over at the US, the F-150, one of their biggest challenges was making sure that, a 5,000 pound F-150 that was towing a boat or whatever still had enough range that was acceptable to consumers, right? And I think the concept of towing things in China is still very new. I don't think it's a fad because you don't see a lot of campers, but people don't sell a lot of campers. So it's a chicken and the egg thing, right?
Right, but people are doing a lot of camping these days
Yes.
because they
yes.
can't go to the normal sightseeing because of COVID.
I'll give you a quick anecdote, Lei. Up in Shunyi near the wall, there's a camp area where there's actually glamping, where there's these campsites that have these like 4-star tents and stuff like that. And so we are starting to see that more, at least I am. And it could be triggered. It is. I won't say it could be. It is or has been triggered by the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that it won't grow because people do want to be outdoors. And let's not forget, Lei, that when you lived here in 2014, 2015, the pollution was bad. You didn't want to be camping outside. Now in Beijing, it is actually a feature, right? So this is new.
Yeah.
Full stop.
But I mean, I know these camping sites or campgrounds have always been there. There's one, I think there's one, if I remember, quite a few of the Great Walls outside of Beijing, but they're always empty. They're always for parking.
Yeah.
So now it may be different. And, because staying in the hotels or the right, is not something that's convenient nowadays. So a lot of DIYing.
And I'm going to go back, Lei, to like the old school US marketing. These companies, these NIO, the Xpeng, right? Where let's watch a movie in the car. Let's have a sleepover in the car. They're creating features and they're creating and pushing these things, right? So it's not, so maybe they're creating supply in order to create that demand. And so this is, to me, traditional automaking, right? Because it's very surprising nowadays, but William Li effectively saying, we're launching this today and tomorrow you can buy it, because between now and August is nothing, right? Normally, well, the ET7 took over a year to get to market, right? So I don't know how much timing or the pandemic had to do with the timing, but yeah, it's the tow thing is a curiosity right now because there's just not a lot known about the capabilities of the ES7 and how much it can tow for how long. But it's an interesting idea.
That tow thing retractable, I thought that was neat because I've never seen that before. That hides under and comes out.
Yeah, that just seems
right?
That just seems like a nightmare from an engineering and quality standpoint, though, right?
Oh, really? Okay. Because I don't see that. I mean, I see all the tow hitches here in the U.S., right? They just sticks out. They're never hidden. So this thing is kind of interesting.
But the bolts that hold those tow hitches in on these cars in the U.S. are like the size of your fist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so think of a boat being towed on that ES7 and then the mechanical thing doesn't work or something, like it could just feel like.
I think this is also NIO being sensitive and addressing the current, whether you want to call it a fad or of what people are doing right now. So a few days ago, they launched this bidirectional charger, which you can bring and make your car a power source, right? You can charge, coffee makers, things, electronics, and even charge other cars.
Ford is leaning into that in the United States.
Yeah. So I think this is NIO being sensitive and addressing it. And that means they're on top of the market on consumer habits. Okay, so,
which isn't surprising because of their app.
Yeah. And the only thing that was probably also on the chatter was this 150 kilowatt hour hybrid battery keeps coming up, yet it's been 1.5 years since this was announced at the NIO 2020 Day, NIO Day 2020, which was held in January 2021. And they've put these up on the slides, on the PPDs, but it's never been talked about. I know this is going to be available in Q4. I think a lot of people are still looking forward to more on what's going to happen there. So
Right.
this is basically now it's the 75 kilowatt and 100 kilowatt hour battery packs. That's the primary.
Just so because we're emphasizing and talking about NIO because they just launched the ES7, but the reality is the ES7 starts at 70,000 US dollars. So it's not going to sell 200,000 units a month. It's, the price point is pretty high for the Chinese consumer. The price point is pretty high for a US consumer. So we have to really just create some relative understanding of how much demand will be for it's going to sell really well, I think, but it's not going to sell in the hundreds of thousands of units.
And here is where the scrutiny comes in is, okay, NIO, now you have 6 models already, either on the market or available to order. But we would like to see, right, first half is pretty much over, but there's a lot of people, I think, that are throwing expectations of what can NIO do on a monthly basis once these models, get into a good production rhythm. And can we expect, the contributions so that we talk about the 20,000 threshold, even the 30,000 threshold?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if they're not in 25 by the end of the year, beginning of next year, then you worry.
My personal expectations is NIO does 20K at the end of this year. If they can do that, I think that's pretty good. But right, they have to get consistently above 10K first.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the volumes, and they are capable. I think they are capable because right, they got the products.
We touched on this last week, Lei, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but to me, I am in complete agreement. Unless there's some quality issue that we'll find out in months later, the product portfolio is strong right now. It's very strong. But I think operationally, they really do need to tighten up because they're having production issues, right? Because what's his name? Li Feng? He said that they had the largest order book in May, right? So can they produce? That's the thing. Can they manufacture those?
And this is why I asked you those 2 questions earlier, because those are the questions that NIO will have to face, right? This is what the consumers are going to be deciding on, right? Because of you have more diverse products, but then again, right, you're going to face this whether you want to call it cannibalization or something else. The customers are now starting to, let's say for a Li Auto, I know it's difficult to compare apples to apples, but it's just one car with all the features. There's nothing else to think about. Is that easier on the customer side than what NIO is doing? I don't know.
Let me bring this scenario up, Lei, because on the sales side and on the distribution side, what Li is doing is much easier because think of if you had 1,000 retail stores in China, you're a NIO and you had 1,000 retail stores. In order to really try not to cannibalize your products, you as a NIO needs to really train each and every salesperson or any person that touches a customer and what the subtle difference is between an ES6. And remember, the audience is a young mother, a woman or a man who might not be that savvy when it comes to automobiles. So training for sales and customer service, that becomes really complicated for NIO. And for Li Auto, it's very simple because you have 2 cars. One is newer, one is older. This is the scenarios and the features and the use cases that the L9 is ideal for. This is what the Li 1 is ideal for, right? And so think of it that way. It's not just that, is it easier? Is it harder? You need to be all around just more on top of things, right?
Yeah, I think probably a good way to describe the current kind of the predicament for NIO is cloudy with sun peering in, but that cloud still shrouds NIO. And they're done with their product introductions. We don't know what's coming next. We know the mass brand is coming next. But any other products, if we look forward to NIO Day 2022, what are they going to announce? What do you think?
Well, that's the thing. Because if you were Li Bin, would you want to announce the mass brand on NIO Day? Or is that going to be treated completely separately, right?
Well, the tradition of the NIO Day is a new model is announced.
Yes.
So we can expect that to happen again this year. And based on the cadence that the mass brand starts in the second half of 2024, I think there might be a chance that we hear about the mass brand at the NIO Day in December.
I was thinking October, November, they might have a separate event for the mass brand or something, but
and the only other possibility is this MPV that was once rumored.
Sure.
That the ES7 was, or they have another code name or model name.
Let's hope that they don't get super lazy, right? Because the part sharing bin between the ES6, ES7, and EC6, EC8, it has to be pretty substantial, right? Maybe not all the interior parts, but you got to leverage that stuff. And so the investment needed to build a new platform, brand new vehicle is very high. So the MPV, the only platform that would make sense is probably the ES8 platform, right? So
yeah, but anyways, if you want to drive the volumes into much higher ground, into let's say the 500,000 units, what capacity that was reported
announced
for the mass brand, NIO is not going to get those volumes done with this existing 6 products. They have to look down market, which is the 200,000 RMB range that William talked about.
Which is the most brutal segment in the market.
Yeah, which is what the Jidu Robo 1 is supposed to be in.
Not only Jidu, but
and many others.
Xpeng, BYD, William Li said, or Li Bin said, they're targeting Tesla Model 3, right? So
yeah, so I personally don't expect with the 6 current models that they can get to a step. They have this step change in volumes. They have to get the mass brand, and they have to get it right. So I guess the conclusion is there's a bit of both good and bad for NIO. Right, if you look at it.
If I take a step back and look at NIO's portfolio, just on paper, I'm pretty worried if I'm the Germans. I'm pretty worried about that.
Yeah, okay. Speaking of the Germans, that Audi rumored to sue NIO for the ESA and ES6, I just think that's ludicrous.
So
it's a bit ludicrous. I mean, the ESA has been on the market for 4 years. What have you been doing? But seriously, I think in China, the model names, they're all registered. I think, but
yep.
I think the issue might be outside of China, especially in the German market. I don't know what the exact lawsuit will be, but
I think it's trademark infringement.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds stupid.
Using the 8 versus the 6 versus, so.
Yeah, it sounds stupid. Like, it's almost like you're becoming a hater, then you've made it.
Yeah, it's very petty, right?
So,
but like I said, the ET5, if I was BMW 3 Series team, I'd be like, wow, wow.
Yeah. But I mean, NIO's basically they've entered a brand new phase that they now just have to execute because there's right. It's all here. It's all been announced, and now let's get to work.
And me, I always scrutinize the operations side of things because it's close and near and dear to my heart. And I just think they're falling down a little bit. If you can't produce 10,000 units a month to sell, get them out the door, you need to fire people, or you need to really, really emphasize just getting enough parts, doing whatever you need to do, beg, borrow, and steal. Because like you said, 10,000, that's the minimum bet to get into this main room. And they're not doing it. So
Hopefully it'll be better, June and later on.
yeah. So the other thing I wrote a quick note here is the difference between the Jidu Robo 1 unveil and the ES7 was very stark, right?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of that, you can basically, how Neil and William present these product launches or introductions, it's all the same, right? You would expect, how it's like an Apple launch event. You would expect Steve Jobs with the turtleneck and the jeans and the whole setup. And that's in itself has become a branding for Neil. Nobody else has come to even close.
As a Westerner, I find the music and some of that stuff a little cheesy, but you're absolutely right. It's a signature thing now, right?
Yeah, it's a signature. William, he just walks onto the stage and start talking. No fuss, right? And he says, this event's going to be 45 minutes. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
Whereas, right, the Jidu is obviously coming from, tech, Baidu and AI, avatar, metaverse. They have to try something new, right?
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's just a different approach. And again, remember, Neo had those really, really amazing pictures of the interior and really beautiful pictures of the ES7, whereas Jidu was really, okay, this is digital first, guys, and it was in your face, right? So
yeah. Because the other thing was just before we started, our good friend Ash from Geely was teasing us on the Radar brand, which we'll see more of later today. They're launching this pickup, EV pickup brand. So just more brands coming.
Geely has a lot on their plate.
Yeah, it's every other day there's some news, and Geely buying into Meizu, right? The smartphone. Geely's one of the Geely subsidiaries taking the majority stake in that smartphone company.
Yeah.
Every other day there's some Geely news going on.
I think management teams are really, really spread thin on some of these companies because they're barely able to stay above water on the current projects and launches and unveils and initiatives. So pickups, if you're talking about new ideas, new opportunities, the pickup market is in its infancy here in China. Are they planning to compete against Great Wall or I think of Rivian, I think of F-150.
Yeah, supposedly the Rivian camp rather than the Great Wall camp.
Yeah, which again, Geely, the only real high-end brand they have is Zeekr, right? I don't really consider. Do you consider Lynk & Co premium luxury?
Yeah, in a bit.
Okay.
But I think Geely just want to be in every segment that you can think of, right?
Yeah.
Trucks, buses, they're doing that. Motorcycles, smartphones, satellites, supersonic trains.
What they need to do is they need to take a look at the lessons from the US automakers, because GM had a dozen brands in a past life. Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Hummer, they're all gone. Ford had Mercury, Ford had Mercur. They had a bunch of brands too, and they're all gone. So, and remember, once we go digital, it's not these physical cars that are going to represent the brand. It's going to be the features, and it's going to be the services, and it's going to be the connectivity and the user experience. So how does that work? And how do you create a distinctiveness between each of these brands? It's an amazing project to have if you're an automaker, but it's just going to be super challenging if you have 20 brands that you need to promote, because there's a lot of infighting. If you have $1 to spend on marketing, how do you divide that up 20 ways, right? So that's the challenge the US automakers ran into. So I will take over for a minute to talk about a couple of things that I thought were interesting this week. First of all, congratulations to Mujib Ijaz and the Our Next Energy team.
BMW, right?
Yes. So Mujib Ijaz is he's the founder of Our Next Energy, or One. They're a battery tech startup that is trying to mass produce a dual chemistry battery pack. And they announced this week that BMW has signed up to be their customer. Huge win for them. And maybe on this next one, Lei, maybe you can throw some color on there. Voyah has announced that they're going to Norway, right?
Yeah, they opened up the first overseas Voyah space in Oslo.
Do you see Voyah?
Voyah, I think, has been one of the surprises.
Can you tell our folks who Voyah is or where they come from?
Yeah, especially from the point of view that this is a state-owned startup. So they're from Dongfeng Motor Corporation, and this is AKA Project H when it was still in stealth. And this was only announced in 2020. The brand was announced in 2020. And they're going with the EREV route. So same as Li Auto. But they also have EV versions of the Voyah Free, the SUV. And they also recently announced the MPV, right? The Dreamer. So this is one of the state-owned startups which we actually had an episode that specifically talked about these brands that are started by state-owned companies. So Voyah, ArcFox, let's say Avatar, these type of brands.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, right, they're also very premium, the renminbi 300,000 and above priced vehicles. And it looked like they were doing pretty well. So they also, the way they're going to Norway is working with this import and export company, I think within Dongfeng, right? If I remember correctly. So again, right, you have to have that aura. This type of brand position the way it is, that we're new, but we're also global. So we're going to be in Oslo, we're going to be in other markets.
The fact of the matter is, Lei, and the other company, did we mention this last week? Hi-Fi announced that they're going to be going to Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these companies, these Chinese EV companies, they're getting bullied because there's this mad rush to enter Europe. Most of them aren't prepared to do it, but they have to because everybody else is doing it. And the main catalyst is probably Tesla opening Berlin Giga, right? And they don't want to be shut out of the entire market of Europe. And so, like you said, and we think there's only going to be really a handful, 6, 7, 8 companies maybe that are going to be fairly successful from a volume and longevity standpoint in Europe. Although almost 24 have either entered or announced that they're entering, the Chinese EV Inc. companies anyways, entering Europe. Not all of them are going to be successful. And so I think each are trying to carve out a niche, and they're being forced to go earlier than they want because of all these other companies have already made announcements, right?
Yeah. So in those camp, MG will be the OG because they're already selling, like, I think, remember correctly, 50,000 units, including UK last year, all EVs.
Yeah.
Okay. Either plugins or BEVs. But MG is a special case because MG was still a kind of a Chinese-British brand.
Well, it definitely has British roots. And we can't forget, if we go lower end, which many of these brands are, XPeng, and we talk about it here about China, where does that leave the ID series? So I think that's really important to kind of keep an eye on as well, because up until now, the Renault Zoe, the ID series have really had unfettered access to the markets because they build locally. And now that Berlin Giga is online, 24 Chinese EV companies have announced and will be selling, first in Norway, but eventually in 2023 and beyond, other European markets, it's going to get brutal over there, right? And remember, the main catalyst of this, we always have to remind people, is that by 2035, the EU wants to eliminate the sale of petrol and diesel fueled engines. So the acceleration is only going to get higher or more. So, and representing Vietnam EV Inc., VinFast.
It's the only company. There's no other.
Yes. But 90 million people versus 1.4 billion, man. You got to give them some credit, right? They've announced they're opening 50 locations in Europe. They didn't put a bookend on it as to when, but they're coming. And so the founder of VinFast is the founder of a company or conglomerate called Vin Group. They do real estate. They do everything. Okay, in Vietnam, he's worth $6.2 billion. He's the richest person in Vietnam. That's not enough money because he's not liquid, number one. And number two, that's just not enough money to enter a dozen markets, including the United States, get a manufacturing facility opened in North Carolina. So this IPO later this year is going to be linchpin. Even if VinFast can raise up to $2 billion on this IPO, which seems a bit like a stretch.
Yeah, I have coined the term VinFast and the Furious.
Because they are both. They're both, right? Fast and Furious.
We can even bet who's going to start selling in the U.S. or actually delivering in the U.S. first, VinFast or one of these Chinese smart EV or somebody else that starts with a B.
It is. And the other thing that's probably another opportunity in the next 12 to 18 months, and Lei, you probably have an opinion about this, is going to be the United States, because Europe is already there. The United States is starting to make that pivot, make that turn, like full momentum towards EVs because of linchpin products like the F-150. And I tweeted yesterday, I've seen one in real life, in the wild, Mustang Mach-E in Beijing, but they're starting to show up en masse on the Beijing streets. So good for Ford, China, being able to get those out and delivered to folks. And then you'll appreciate this. I was at Raffles. I had to go pick up something from Raffles near Xinfuzun, right? And I saw this Cadillac CTS, and it was parked right next to the Mustang. I was like, wow, two American legacy brands parked next to each other. That's pretty weird to see. So
the only other thing we can mention, and maybe we can end after, is what I tweeted earlier, that BYD will be exhibiting at CES 2023. This has major implications and a huge sign of things to come. Okay, because CES is the stage to make announcements, okay? And that's the first time that BYD is exhibiting. So run your imaginations wild on what they're going to announce. It's going to be a huge announcement.
Let's not underemphasize that they decided to do it at a technology conference, not an automotive show, right? Not an auto show. The last thing that I wanted to just mention was that Electric Last Mile Solutions has decided that it's no longer going to be an ongoing concern. This was a startup that was building electric commercial trucks out in Troy, Michigan. One of the co-founders was the Ford China CEO for about 5 months.
Yeah, his reputation's just going down the drains.
Yeah, Jim Taylor, who was a longtime GM executive.
Hummer? Was he with?
Yes, he was the CEO of Hummer. Yep. And so they were going to contract manufacture trucks in China, but the SPAC didn't make as much money as they wanted to, and so now they're going to liquidate. So it is happening. This is probably the highest profile company that's going out of business, but you don't hear much from Faraday right now. They're probably still under SEC investigation, but so they have to be having cash crunch issues as well. Have you heard anything about Faraday? I have not.
Well, so far, they're on track on their promises, at least production-wise.
I wonder if we will see them in Detroit.
I don't know. If not Detroit, LA, right? So November would be. I think they were. Their plan was Q3. Was it Q3 that they start production? So that's coming up very soon.
Yep.
So yeah, and I just wish Carson the best of luck because he went through that with Byton and all the promises of SOPing that never got anywhere. Yeah, and next week we talk more in detail about the Auto L9.
That's right.
3 weeks of huge launches. And I believe the G9, the Xpeng G9, that's coming up as well. That got delayed, right? So all these new models continuing just waves of onslaught,
Xpeng has been eerily quiet the last month and a half, so maybe we need to ping somebody to see how they're doing. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.